up the boil here. We've only got a little bit left, and then we are done for the year. Oh. I just went into the back, collected everything that was left, ended up dumping most of it because it's just not good anymore. What happens is the trees, when they get warm, the maple buds start to swell, and when the maple buds start to swell, it changes the flavor of the sap, and it gets what we call buddy. And that happened last week behind my house. So we pulled all those lines out of the mix, and it happened this week up at the property where we do the majority of our tapping. What happens is it creates a very strong smelling and flavored syrup, much more molasses-like and much less maple syrup-like. But this is it for the year. It's our last one. Only got about, believe it or not, only about 40 gallons in the nurse tank to boil down. But I need to push everything that's in the back pan through to the front pan. So we'll be boiling for about an hour probably. Doesn't take very long. I've only been going a couple minutes. You can already see we've got a little bit of steam up here coming through. I just activated the float pan from the back where the main evaporation happens into the front, which is very, very sweet, mostly syrup at this point. What happens is the hot raw sap comes in the back of this large piece of machinery here, basically, and warms everything up. We've got a preheat hood. It comes in about 40 degrees. It comes out of that preheat hood at 180 to 190, right into the main evaporation chamber. We're not going to go crazy today. We're not going to go ripping fast. Slow and steady is going to win the race for us here today. We use a lot of wood. I use primarily hemlock and pine. If I'm looking to prolong the fire a little bit, I'll throw some hardwood in. Hello, Ella. Good, how are you? If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. I'll monitor the screen just so I can answer those questions for you. But this is what a very, very large hobby setup looks like, or a very small producer setup looks like. We look to produce, we were hoping this year to produce around 100 gallons of finished product. I believe right now we're sitting at 35 gallons, so that's a really, really bad year. Once I'm done today, I should be right at 40 gallons. Last year we did 67 or 69 gallons, I forget which one. So we basically made 70 gallons last year. We added more taps into the mix this year. We were hoping to hit 100 gallons. Last year was actually not a bad year, but not a great year. The year before was also not a great year. Both years were below average. And this year was just just garbage. So a lot of work goes into this to make it all happen. And it's very disappointing when you get a bad year on top of a couple less than desirable years. Making a couple adjustments in the back here. Making sure our floats are working, coming up where they're supposed to be. Got sap flowing in fairly slow. I'm going to grab a little bit of wood, throw some more wood in there. We should have some other videos on the channel relating to maple production, the boiling, the bottling, filtering. And I believe I did one on tapping maple trees with young kids, which is something I do with my children. They enjoy it a lot. We do it right inside. We'll do small batch inside on the stove. Hi, Ella. Yes, good day. So like I was saying, this is a small producer setup or a large hobby setup. I consider myself a little bit of both. It's very much a hobby for us, but it's nice now because it's a hobby that has started returning a little bit of the investment. Not the whole investment, but a little bit of the investment, which is a nice place to be. Hello. Hope you all are well today. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. This is a maple syrup evaporator. The arch itself, which is where the fire is, that's called the arch. This is a wood-fired arch. They do wood-fired, propane-fired, and oil-fired. Most of the smaller guys are using wood, especially up in this area because there's a large abundance of it. We do small tree jobs. We end up with a lot of hemlock and pine that's not big enough to go to the mill, so that goes into here. So again, liter evaporator makes the arch. This particular pan setup was made by Small Brothers. It's about 20 years old now. Small Brothers was purchased by Waterloo and then LaPierre. So this particular setup is no longer made, but they make things a lot like it. Any mid-sized sugar house is going to have something exactly like this. The large ones are going to have something exactly like this, just on a much bigger scale. One big difference between some of the larger producers and us, we do not use any reverse osmosis. The big guys have to. They've got an enormous amount of maple sap that they need to concentrate down before it goes through the actual evaporator itself. So they use reverse osmosis for that. We don't. I can evaporate right around 40 gallons an hour, plus or minus a couple gallons, depending on the conditions of the day, depending on the conditions of the wood, and kind of how tired I am, because this can get kind of tiring to run. So today we're only going to run it for about an hour, somewhere in that range. I'm going to pull all the sap through that we have, get that all the concentrate that's in the back pan up into the front pan. And what we'll do is we'll fill the nurse tank with water. Once it empties, we'll fill the nurse tank with water and kind of let that push through. By the time that's all done, all of our syrup should be in the front pan. I can let it cool down. I'll draw everything off and I'll finish it somewhere else. We're having a little bit of difficulty with the actual feed itself because there's so little head pressure actually pushing it through. So I'm going to be fiddling around in the back a little bit, trying to make sure all that sap does actually come through. A little bit of work, but we'll get there. I have no doubt. We burn right around 1 cord of wood in a 10-hour period, if that's what we're going to run this for. Somewhere in that range. Today I'm burning mostly pine. The idea is, especially with the softwood, like I said, we get it left over from jobs, but we want something that creates a lot of heat and a lot of flame to throw that flame all the way across all the bottom of these pans. So these are what's called a raised flue pan. There's fingers, and the flame runs inside of all these fingers in this pan, which gives it that much more surface area. That much more surface area creates a much better and faster boil. Another thing that's important is to minimize the amount of time that this door is open. So what I'll try to do is throw 5 or 6 pieces in, close it, let it sit for a few minutes, and then we'll throw 5 or 6 more once it burns down a little. Just a little sap in the tank, I can get this off. That should be absolutely just belting out. After that, no water in there. That's fine. Huh? I've only got an hour to boil. What is it now, 3 o'clock? Yeah, I've only got an hour to boil, so I'll be in for dinner. Hmm? Okay. You do your stuff. thing that happens when you boil this is it creates a lot of foam at times. So we use a defoaming agent, which is as simple as a couple drips of vegetable oil. And that helps keep everything flowing nice. So if you see me walk around with a little dripper bottle of vegetable oil. Probably end up just finishing whatever's left inside. Or whatever's left in the front pan when I'm done. Yeah. I got a couple gallons in the finisher, I think. I got another gallon and a half or so in a 5 gallon. So I pulled off. Yeah, it's been sprinkled. Smells like the end of the year. Yeah. Pretty much. Pretty much. Good. All right, if you got any questions, if you would like to ask them, I'm monitoring the bottom of the screen there, and I will do my very best to answer whatever questions you may have. Couple pieces of hemlock from out back. Every now and then somebody driving by will stop. I think we're on fire. This produces a decent amount of dark smoke from the pine and hemlock, along with a lot of steam once it's running, which it is now. And as you come up over the hill towards my house, it looks like the building's on fire. So we'll usually give the fire chief a call first and say, hey, we're boiling. I didn't today because we're only going to go for an hour, but I'm not running really heavy, really hot. So hot enough to get the work done, but I'm not really pushing it. Our best evaporation rate happens on a day when it's clear. Doesn't really matter if there's a little breeze or not, but the nice clear days, we evaporate faster than a day like today, which is sprinkling a little bit. We had a really good evaporation rate, I think about 2 weeks ago, where we ran 42 3/4 gallon an hour through the systems. That's 42 3/4 gallons of raw sap through per hour, and that's on an average over, I think it was an 11-hour day, somewhere in there. And I don't remember what we had produced, what the ratio was that day. Ratio today is about 1.9% sugar, which gives, or the sugar content's about 1.9%, which gives me, I think, around 46 gallons of sap to produce 1 gallon of syrup. I forget the exact math. I could do it, but once this is fully heated up, as far as the arch heated all the way through, the whole thing is lined with fire brick, and the fire brick itself will glow. We're not going to get to that point today. But that is how it works. So one of the questions that we will get occasionally is, Tim, how do I know when my sap is going bad? Right, that's a good question. It's one that we wrestle with a lot. I actually do taste tests of the sap before each boil, especially this time of year. And what happens is, as the tree buds start to swell, it changes the flavor of the sap. That's number one. Number two is maple sap is very similar to milk as far as when it gets warm, it spoils. So the best thing that you can do for maple sap is when you collect it, boil it right away or keep it very cold. So the guys with the big production, the big maple producers, they will have giant walk-in coolers basically, or they're able to keep that whole area so cold they won't heat that part of the building. And since it's usually cold outside, it's like a walk-in cooler. They won't heat that part of the building. It's in a stainless steel huge vat, and that is fed from there through the reverse osmosis system into the evaporator itself. I was at my buddy's sugar house the other day. His evaporator is 4 feet wide by 14 feet long. This is 2 feet wide by 6 feet long. So that is a massive difference with the actual square footage of how much he can evaporate. He also has a preheat hood. This is a very big, just a huge game changer having the preheat hood because it brings this setup from a 25 to 30 gallon per hour setup up to a 40 gallon per hour setup, or 42 and a half, 42 and 3/4 like we did the other day. So if you're doing a lot, yes, the hood itself, this preheat hood, is an awful lot of money. They're, I think, $4,000 or $5,000 is what they run now, somewhere in that range. But if you're going to do a lot, it's going to cut down your boil time immensely. So if we run a 10-hour day and we were only able to get, let's say, 27 gallons an hour, but with this hood, it bumps us up to 40. That's an increase of 13 gallons an hour. In a 10-hour day, that's 130 gallons processed through. And if we have 1,000 gallons, which is not always uncommon, it's definitely not uncommon in a good year. If we've got 1,000 gallons to boil through, then if we can push 400 gallons a day instead of 270 gallons a day, that's a huge difference. It saves wood, it saves time, because this hood costs nothing to run. The way this hood works is the steam from these pans, because these pans are only this high, and the back one's a touch higher, but the evaporation, the steam, runs up through this preheat hood, and there's pipes that go through the hood. As the steam passes it, the cold sap runs inside. The cold sap runs inside those pipes. It does two things. Number one, it heats the sap up, which really, really helps a lot. It gives you an efficient preheater. But, and this is where my HVAC guys can help me out a lot, but when you have hot and you run cold through it, that hot sticks right to those cold pipes, which then causes condensation, which this collects. It's got a V-groove inside it, it collects, and all that condensation exits both from the front side of the hood over here, we've got water running off, and the back side of the hood we also have water running off as well. So both of those things help increase the production that we need. This is running pretty good now. It's definitely up to temperature. You should be able to see the steam, at least a little bit. If I open this up, you'll see a little bit more. But one of my favorite things about this front little hood is it doesn't really add too much. I've done the numbers on it, maybe half a gallon an hour, maybe a quarter gallon an hour. But the big thing it does is every time we open this front to put wood in, there's a little bit of dust that comes out. And with this hood, it keeps that dust completely out of that syrup, which is great. It helps with filtration a lot. Now let's be honest, a little bit of wood dust is not going to hurt you, but it makes more work for us with filtration. So, I've been pacing, walking back and forth a lot. You are always on your feet in a sugar house, especially when you're running it by yourself like I am today. Sometimes I'll have a friend who does nothing but tend the fire and I'll do everything else. But this is what we're doing today. I'm running it. I'm watching the back nurse tank, making sure that doesn't run low. I'm watching the float box in the back, the syrup float box in the front, the draw-off side, which is over here today. Actually, I think the last video was on that side as well. And the interesting thing with this whole process is we get a little scientific with it. So I actually have a hydrometer, and when we draw the syrup off, or when we think it's syrup and we draw it off, we put it in this test cup, we put a hydrometer in it, and we test it. And that hydrometer tells us officially whether it's syrup or not. Basically, that helps measure the density, specifically the specific gravity. So if I was in school and paying attention during the classes, like I should have been probably, and you were able to teach me science surrounding one of these machines, I would have paid a lot more attention. So what we'll do is when we think we have syrup, we'll draw off. And the syrup is tested at 211 degrees. That's what they want the syrup in that test cup to be, 211 degrees. They have found that in the time it takes you to draw off from this evaporator through this valve, that syrup cools right around, well, it'll cool from 219 to 211. So it'll cool those 8 degrees. And that's why it's specifically measured at 211 degrees for this system that we are using today. You can measure sap at any you can measure syrup at any temperature as long as you have the chart. There is an actual chart that says at 60 degrees it should be X, all the way on up to 211 degrees. So the maple sap officially becomes syrup at 7 degrees over the boiling point of water. And the boiling point of water changes every single day. It might not seem like a lot when you're working in your kitchen, whether water boils at 211 degrees or 213 degrees, it doesn't really matter. Because you're just waiting for your water to boil so you can cook your pasta or whatever you're looking to cook with the water boiling. Hope stay back, it's hot. In the maple syrup world, the 2-degree difference makes a massive difference. Right, if we're 2 degrees shy, we're nowhere close to syrup. And if we're 2 degrees over, we're well past syrup. We traditionally run our syrup a tiny bit thicker, just because I personally like it a little bit thicker. The problem is, and I've done this for my buddy a couple times, I'll make a little batch for him super thick, like almost corn syrup thick. That's the way he likes it. He just likes the real syrupy stuff. But it goes bad fast, and it does. When I say goes bad, it doesn't actually go bad, deteriorate, become garbage. What it'll do is it will crystallize in the bottom of the glass. So it'll grow rock candy until it brings itself back down to the consistency that it should be. There's a lot of wood chips floating around. Only got about 25 gallons left. We started with about 30. I pumped up a little bit more that I had down below. Just the top. Just empty everything that we had. Once that's done, we're going to pump water into the nurse tank, and that's going to gravity flow into this system. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. We're going to hope for that. My kids all grew up in the sugar house just kind of like I did. They know it's hot. Sometimes we all learn the hard way even, but we learn to be careful. So I tell people all the time, this is my happy place. This basically means winter is over. Not that I necessarily love that, because we do make part of our income plowing snow. But this is kind of the winter's over. We're getting close to actually mowing lawns and doing all the other good business stuff. So. But the sugaring is something that I did with my grandfather, starting when I was his age, all the way up until, well, I guess until now. So we've done it for a few generations. The kids here will be generation 4 that I'm aware of. I believe it went past that. I'm not entirely sure, but they are at least generation 4. I'm quite sure my grandfather did it with his father and maybe grandfather as well, but to be completely honest and open, we're running with the 4 generation mark. But this is what a small scale sugar house looks like. It is Maple Weekend in New York. It's the second one. Last weekend was the first Maple Weekend. A lot of guys in this area, which is Ulster County of New York. A lot of folks in Ulster County, New York have already pulled their taps. They're done. This is the last boil for us. I wanted to do something. Number 1, I love it. Number 2, it is Maple Weekend, so we want to try to have something going on in case anybody stops by. The idea would be to boil from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. We just don't have enough good sap to be able to do that right now. Yeah.
It feels like drips of water.
Oh.
You gotta heat it up very quickly.
Gotta be careful, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yep, I know. Adjusting the floats a little bit, making a few adjustments to the nurse tank. We do have syrup. We're not going to be filtering this today. This is going inside for us. This is pure cooking syrup. It's very dark. Most of the time, this is the stuff that would used to go to the maple flavor type places, the factories, things like that, but we don't produce nearly enough for that. and we like to use it for cooking at our house. And the kids like to catch the drips. Watch your fingers, it's gonna be hot again. Be hot. Stop. So we have on that side, realize now that you probably can't really see it since I'm in the way, but there is a thermometer over there and that tells me whether we're at syrup or not. I calibrated that earlier today. Again, since this is going to be our use, that's going to be close enough. We'll end up bringing it inside, doing a simple filter, finishing it down just a little bit thicker since it is going to be for baking. You can see Daniel is sticking his finger under there, trying to grab some good stuff. Let's see. Yeah. Now you can see him. We've got a fire extinguisher in the back. Let's see if I can point to it. There we go. We've got an ABC type fire extinguisher. It's going to be good for any type of fire that we encounter in the sap house itself. I hope I never ever have to use that, because if that gets discharged in here, any of the product that's not sealed in my mason jars or glass bottles is garbage. That stuff goes everywhere. So we also have what's known as a water can, which is just a regular 2.5 gallon, one of those big fire extinguishers, just slightly smaller than our draw-off tank, and that is pressurized water. So that should deal with whatever we may have in here as far as a potential issue. I've been reminded, and I need to start saying it more, but we do have maple syrup for sale. We don't have a whole lot this year, but we do have maple syrup for sale. If you're interested, our email address is elmendorfacres@gmail.com, and I will happily provide you with a price sheet. We can ship. We set up Venmo. Unfortunately, shipping is not cheap, but we are happy to ship. We've got mostly a dark amber syrup, but we have pints, quart mason jars, the flat pancake style jars, both in larger and smaller. We also have hot bottled cinnamon maple syrup, which is really, really good. What we do is we actually take a cinnamon stick and we bottle it right in the jar with the syrup. If I can find one here, I grab the wrong bottle. Not that one either. There we go. It's a little dusty, but I can show it to you. So we found this is incredibly tasty. If I hold up the light, maybe you can see. There you go. See the cinnamon stick floating in it, right in here. So that has been hot bottled with a cinnamon stick in it. Very tasty that way. This stuff is shelf stable. Doesn't need to be in the refrigerator. Until it's opened, I always recommend you put it in the fridge after you open it. But until then, it does not need it. I do recommend a cool place out of sunlight is important. So in a basement or a pantry, either one of those things is great. You can buy maple syrup, keep it for a long time. I have some that I bottled as a 4-H project when I was a kid. I still have that syrup today. All right. Again, if you have any questions you would like to ask them, I will do my very, very best to answer whatever question you may have. This year has not been a great year for the maple industry, at least in our area. You've been with us for a few minutes, I mentioned that already. We produced, I believe, about 35 gallons. Hopefully we'll be quite close to 40 by the time it's done this year. We had a goal of basically a good average year, but an average year would have been 100 gallons for us. There's a reason that there is a thing called an average. Just because you've got some years that blow it out of the water and some years that underperform. Well, there's just no words for this year, I guess. Other than a definite disappointment as far as performance. We had a great winter for it. It was nice and cold for a long time. First time in a long time we've had a winter like that. And we were looking at the extended forecast thinking that this was really going to be a good maple year. Unfortunately, we had a couple of those 70, almost 80 degree days, and we never had a reset at night. These trees need to reset at night. They need nights in the mid-20s, sometimes the low 20s, even into the teens occasionally will help. Because basically what you want is you want to prolong the season. The sap comes from the tree. It's only good from when the tree is thawed until the first buds really start to swell and the little leaves start coming out. Because that's when the flavor changes, and that's what we're dealing with right now. It's still running. I actually dumped buckets today, which was painful, but we had to do it because it just wasn't good. It did not have a good smell. Got a nice maple smell. It was giving off that more of a buddy type smell, we call it. And that becomes a very strong syrup, and it'll even get to the point of tasting almost sour. Do what? It is extremely hot, as you might imagine. Lots of steam, boiling water. Daniel says yummy water. Got more pieces in here, the oil's dying down. Again, we're running this thing pretty conservatively today. Not really trying to break any records. Don't have a whole lot to boil down. Again, we burn primarily pine and hemlock, softwoods. They're what work the best in this. We want hot, we want flames. We want that to roll all the way through. Not only the 6-foot pan, but we want to keep that heat consistent all the way through the 6 feet of the pan right up to the very base of the stack, which is about 7 feet. I was talking a little bit about how long you can keep the syrup. It will last for a very, very long time when it is bottled properly and it's in glass. You keep it in glass and out of the sun, somewhere a little bit more cool, you can keep it for many, many years. I've got a bottle that I did, like I said, about 25 years ago, and it's still in great shape. Did you get my water bottle? Oh, bring my coffee cup inside, yeah. And bring me some water out, please. No. No. You keep anything in glass, it lasts for a very long time. The bottle in glass, it stays good for basically forever. If I remember correctly, my grandfather had some that he produced, and he ended up using it for about 20 or 25 years as well. But this is the last boil of the 2025 sugar season. We'll be over after today. No, no barking. We had enough wood on hand to be able to boil down on the lowest. With the lowest quality wood, we had enough wood on hand to be able to boil down about 4,000 gallons of sap, which would have given us somewhere between 90 and 100 gallons of syrup. We actually had some pretty decent firewood, so we would have been able to produce probably 120 gallons of syrup with the firewood that we processed had the season work the way we hoped.
If I drink warm water, then I can expect it. Funny about it.
Not much breeze back there. It's still warm. Yeah.
Daddy, this is in the middle of seven.
Oh, yeah? Not there yet. Still got a few degrees to go. Again, what we're producing today is not going to be for sale. Today is basically cooking syrup for our house. Since we have access to maple syrup, we tend to use it for everything. We make maple sugar candy. We make granulated sugar, which is like a brown sugar made out of maple. We also do the cooking syrup, which is basically for us or just for family. And then we've got the regular dark amber, sometimes some medium amber. This year was mostly dark amber. But even the darkest syrup this year, no, I want that off. Even the darkest syrup this year has had a very, very good flavor. Yeah, it's also very hot. One thing we experimented a little bit this year was with espresso bean. We hot bottled a little bit of espresso beans in a couple things of syrup just to try that out, see how it worked for us. Definitely a cool flavor. I like it. Pretty good. The espresso beans, if you're the person that likes them, you can chew on them. They've got a maple flavor, and the syrup is got a really nice espresso flavor, which is pretty cool. We're always looking for something different to do. I'm very much a purist when it comes to maple, but I enjoy different flavor profiles.
Hot water really cleans it out. The way I like the bathroom gets hot water. Not done. Here, no hot.
Well, we do have our maple products for sale. You can send us an email. The Elmendorf Acres at gmail.com is a good email address for us. We can ship it. It is not necessarily cheap to ship, but you get real syrup boiled over fire and no reverse osmosis used. Nothing wacky added, just real syrup. And
Like it.
you know, I'm a little opinionated on it, but I think our syrup's pretty good.
Me too. Running. Keep watching my so sticky, so it doesn't get sticky. Good idea.
Yeah.
But there's hot water there. But only big finger.
You don't have to. You don't crank the bottom of it open just a touch, which increased the draft on the arch. That's going to push a little more heat. Wood's going to burn a little bit faster, but right now we're really only boiling. The whole pan is boiling all the way across, but the main heat is in the center two dividers of this front pan, and I want to push the rest of this syrup across. So I crank up the heat just a touch to get me there.
Oh my goodness. I really like it.
Uh-huh. Now after today we're going to be done boiling. There's a chance for another run next week, but the trees are just too far gone at this point. So what I'm going to do is we're emptying our nurse tank completely through. I got a couple 100 gallons of water waiting to pump up to that. As soon as it's done, we'll mix the water in with the sweet in the back, which is going to help push a little bit more of that sweet through into the front pan. And then once that's done, the back pan is mostly water. We'll shut everything down, we'll cool it down. Once the arch is completely cool, I will draw the entire front pan off, then fill the front pan with water. And we use vinegar for cleaning solution. So we dump white vinegar right in the pans itself. That is by far one of the best cleaning agents. It's awesome because it's natural, there's nothing bad in it for you. But that's how we clean these when we're all done, is we just use white vinegar. It cleans them up nice. We pull it all apart, we bring it outside, we rinse it, and then we put it all back together waiting for next year. And then what I will do is just before we do the first boil of the year, I'll fill water, I'll flush everything through, make sure there's no dust or anything in there, and then we'll fire up for the year. So that's how we close it down, that's how we clean it up. Let the vinegar sit for at least 3 days. Usually we let it sit for a week. That eats all the niter, eats all the niter off the pans. The niter is created, the natural occurring thing that happens when you boil and produce maple syrup. One of the things that we filter out when we're doing all of our filtering is we're filtering out the niter, along with whatever else happened to show up while we were boiling. Little dust, a piece of bark, things like that. Having the hood system that we have makes this a very clean setup, which is nice. You don't get much stuff floating into the syrup. An open system without the hood, you get a little bit more material floating around that you then have to filter out. Like I was saying, this front hood doesn't really do much for production, but it does keep some dust out of the finished product before we filter it. Kids are always in here wandering around. I like to do a quick wipe down once in a while. Just to keep things looking a little nicer. So for us, the big advantage for wood is we get the wood off of jobs that we do during the summer for folks. The large negative for the wood is your fire is not quite as consistent as it will be with oil or propane, and it's not as clean as oil or propane. Oftentimes the wood-fired syrup, I have found that it is has just a little bit different flavor. Once in a while I'll have just a touch of a smoky flavor. I don't think the average person would notice it or be able to say, hey, that's what I think this flavor is. But that's, again, my opinion. Front pan is almost syrup again. We'll have a draw in a minute for 3. We load our syrup in, we load our wood in, we try to crisscross it a little bit. That allows for more flame, more airflow, more flame. That's why we do that. The more flame we have, the more heat we have. Of course, it does mean we burn a little more wood.
Yeah.
Did I scare you? I mean, you were doing something you shouldn't have done? They're eating Twizzlers.
Candy canes for free.
You live? Oh, candy canes? Yeah.
I mean, sucking up.
One of the things we're constantly doing is monitoring, especially this late in the season where we're just bringing stuff down. I just switched over from sap to water now is feeding in to the back pan. That's going to push everything through. But the back pan, it started getting a little bit lower than I would like to see. So I did a little bit of, I forced a little bit of water through just to bring me up to where I want it to be. Well, we're flowing in now, coming back up where it's supposed to be. What you got to watch very carefully is you don't want to scorch your pans. You don't want to burn your pans. And those flues that I was talking about before, they're whether they're this way or this way, it doesn't really matter. But looking in from the top, you want your sap just a little bit over where the finger is going to be. So you want somewhere between 1/4 and 1.25 inches of sap over that flue. That's what we found. This one works very well. So that's what we go for. It had actually dropped down past that a little bit, so now we're filling stuff in. It's coming back up now, which is good. There is a sight glass that we monitor on the back evaporator, so I don't have to keep sticking my head over the boiling water, the boiling sap. But that is now starting to come up, so that's good. We should be about due for a draw over here. Out there. So we cut and split and stack our wood, and it all gets stored in IBC totes. Some of you are very familiar with those. I actually did a little video on our channel about those, why we use them, where some folks might not find it practical. They work very well for us. It's nice because we can process all the firewood, stack it in that. We cut that tote, the plastic part, in half. We use over top as a little tent. That becomes the roof. The sides are open. But the part that makes it extremely convenient is we can grab the forks on the tractor, move it from the property down here, and we can set 4 or 5 of them in front of the sap house. Depending on the day, I'll burn either 2 or 3 per day. So we can have enough to basically burn about 2 full days. Ah, Ethan Hez.
When
Okay, if you were just joining us, welcome to the Sugar House. This is a small setup. We are a small producer. We kind of made the transition from a larger hobby to a small producer a couple of years ago with the addition of this setup. We were,
you can use junk wood.
huh?
You can use junk wood.
We use junk wood, yeah.
Like Nana did.
Like Nana did.
Yeah, she made a sand pit with the beams that were the old beams that holded up
The porch.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So we made a transition from a larger hobby producer to or larger hobby, not producer, but a large hobby to a small producer. And we've got a local market here where we are able to sell right about 50 gallons a year without trying that hard. We can sell more than that if we have it, but it really depends on the year. This year we're only going to produce about 40 gallons. We always keep it up for ourselves. Fortunately, we had a little bit left over from last year, so we'll be using a lot of that for ourselves this year. And what a little bit what I was talking about before is we use maple syrup for everything. We use it in oatmeal, cream of wheat, we use it in our coffee, we use it in baking, we use it in cooking. We use maple syrup as an almost complete replacement for brown sugar or white sugar. We also like to do stuff with honey. There's a local guy down the road that we'll buy honey from. Mr. Glenn. But we enjoy the maple syrup. It's started as a hobby. It's something I did as a kid with my grandfather, and it has now morphed into what you see here. Whether you go into a small producer's sugar shack or a very large producer, whether in northern New York or western New York, all the way up into Vermont, New Hampshire, Canada, all of them are going to have a setup that looks similar to this that they're going to evaporate on. The only difference is they're going to use maybe not wood, they might use oil, they might use propane, and the evaporator itself is going to be the size of this entire room. So my friend down the road, he has a 4 foot by 14 foot evaporator. This is only a 2 foot by 6 foot. We can get about 40 gallons. We can burn through about 40 gallons of sap an hour on this particular setup. The way he's set up, I believe he can run somewhere between 200 and 235 gallons per hour, which is quite impressive. You know, we look at a day when we've got 240 gallons and say, hey, we've got to boil for 6 hours. He looks at the day with 240 gallons and says, boy, it's not even worth firing the thing up. Yeah. So we're just running some pure water through at this point. That's what's coming into the evaporator. It's pushing the concentrate out of the back pan into the front pan. It's usually kind of how I do it, especially on a year where it's not been great. I want to get every last little bit of syrup we can out of this process. It's a lot of work, definitely a labor of love, and I want to make it as worthwhile as it can be. So if you're just joining us, if you have any questions, you can comment on this. I've been monitoring the bottom of the screen. I can answer any questions you may have, at least hopefully. But it is Maple Weekend in New York State, both today and tomorrow. It's one of the reasons we are boiling today, is just kind of to celebrate that and to have the sugar house open if anybody wants to stop by. A lot of the local sugar houses, depending on where you are in New York, are going to have open houses today and tomorrow. So I know Shaver Hill, I'm 99% sure Shaver Hill up past Grand Gorge there is going to be open tomorrow with an open house. I know they were open today with an open house. We're going to do a draw here. If you can see this down here, it's going to come out very dark. This is a very dark syrup. Much of a cooking syrup for us more than anything at this point. Just a quick little draw. keep an inverted lid. You always get a couple drips, and then of course the kids like to come over and catch the drips. Yeah, of course. We'll do the final finish inside. We'll put it in the big stainless pot and just touch it up a little bit inside. Oh yeah.
They both start with a P.
Huh. There's not really too much idle time in this process when you're doing it the way we're doing it. When we were much more hobbyists, there was a lot more idle time. Hi, James. When we were hobby more, there was a lot more idle time. I'd throw a little bit of wood on, but we would burn down between 5 and 6 gallons of sap an hour. This is set up for about 40 gallons an hour, and I'm constantly moving. I lose weight when I'm in the sugar house, which is good. I could tend to lose some more, but we're getting ready to work pretty hard again as well, so I think I'll be all right. Doing? Just taking that. How did I know that's what you were doing? Just tasting it? For a taste test? Yeah. Kids are in the sugar house to taste test things. Although I don't know if that's a good taste test or not, because I'm pretty sure anything with sugar in it, kids will eat even if it doesn't taste good.
You know that syrup tastes good.
Yeah.
That tastes less sweet, much less sweet. Right?
So we are looking at potentially upgrading our pans this year. Noticed some small leaks in the back. They were close to end of life when we purchased them. We knew that they would get us through a few years, get me to learn the system of how to operate them properly. A set of pans, all this is all quite expensive. So the idea was run this first, learn it, make sure we want to do this, make sure it works well for us, and then upgrade to a different set of pans. So we are looking at different pans this year. I would run them again next year. We're a little bit worried about a failure. You know, when it was more of just a hobby, I wouldn't worry about a failure so much. But now that it's a little bit more than a hobby, for those of you that don't know, these pans are all essentially semi-custom or custom made, and they will make them as you order them. So if we were to have a catastrophic failure, let's say in February, I wouldn't see new pans until the following October or November. So if we're looking at ordering in the next month or so, they'd be in time, and they would be here in time for the 2026 maple season. Again, definitely one of my favorite times of year. I don't like to rush things, but I do enjoy the maple season over some of the other seasons quite a bit.
What do you think is a good idea? Maple covered Pez.
That doesn't sound very good. Daniel says he wants to do maple covered Pez. I don't think that sounds too good.
I love it.
Maple cotton candy, however, sounds amazing.
You know what? It tastes good. And you know that I love Pez.
Yeah, you love candy.
And Daddy likes food. But he doesn't eat it too often. Hello, I can talk. Yes, pretty good.
What are today's projections? Today's projections are it's the last boil of the year. We only had about 50 gallons boiled down. Almost everything that was in the woods today I dumped because it wasn't good. The season is done, unfortunately. So it looks like we're going to close out somewhere close to 40 gallons, which means we're able to squeak out an extra 7 or 8 gallons just by pushing the envelope a little bit. The stuff I'm pulling off today is really, really dark. It's going to be cooking for us. That's about it. Us or family. So definitely a closeout to not a great year. By a long shot. By a long shot. I told Abby we're probably not going to do a terrible amount of the cinnamon stuff this year. We're going to focus more on just the pure syrup until we find out exactly who wants what and how much they want. So we told most of the people who buy, not everybody yet, because I haven't told you yet, I don't think, but we told most of the people who buy from us that it's not been a good year. So if you want it, get your list in early. That way we know what we've got to sell elsewhere. It sounded like next year we might be looking at doing a booth at Olive Day. So wasn't sure if it was going to be this year or next year, but the gentleman who's doing it sounds like he wants to continue doing it for a little longer. I certainly don't want to step on his toes with that. So he's a good friend of ours. We're not running it very hot today. Running consistently, but not hot. The very back of the arch is at 950 something degrees. And the door is 995 right now. So we're not running crazy hot, but hot enough. Definitely hot enough. What?
Cotton candy with hot chocolate.
Cotton candy with hot chocolate for what?
For our business.
Oh, for our business? So Katie thinks that we should do cotton candy with hot chocolate for our business. That's her idea of the day.
What? Cotton candy with hot chocolate. Oh, interesting. I was just saying that might be a good idea. What might? What might be a good idea? I think we should have popcorn with maple syrup drizzled on top. We know how that tastes. We have the chocolate. Okay. I think we should have popcorn with syrup drizzled on top. That's a new interesting.
So we did have to do a couple updates this year on the evaporator itself. I had a float arm go bad for the front float box. And actually I had both float arms go bad. I had the back float go bad late last year, but we limped it through the year. So we had to put a new float in the back. We had to put a new float arm in the back, a new float arm in the front. And last year we did a front float itself. He's already gone. Jackson's already gone. Running around somewhere. Daniel's in here though.
Yeah.
We've done a decent amount of updates on this year. So it's a little painful to spend that money, have a bad year, and then look at replacing pans as well. Not what you want to, not the way you want to end your year, for sure. But every year we're upgrading. We are making things a little bit better. We just Daniel again eating sugar off the lid.
It's rusty,
We
Dad.
did just agree to buy a 550-gallon stainless, what used to be a milk tank from somebody. So it's a double wall stainless, it's insulated, and that should help keep our sap better longer, which is going to be nice. So if we get those warm days where only 100 gallons runs, rather than having to boil it off right away, we can wait till the following day and get another run in there before we boil.
There. Oh, where? That's what I did. Hey, you go get it. That's a new belt again.
We did add we added some extra filtration in line this year, just to help keep some of the big stuff out, the bark and stuff like that, before it hits the evaporator pans. We made some nice upgrades this year. Overall, I'm very happy with how this has worked. Listen, the pan itself is not in terrible shape. It's got a couple leaks and seeps, but overall it's not terrible. The front pan had some warping from when we bought it. So the front pan's not quite perfect, but it does work.
It's easier to get it off with leather, right?
I would like to see another year out of it if we can do it. I'll find out more once I get things cleaned. You know, if it's just a couple tiny little pinholes, then we can look at the possibility of not doing the pan this year. If it's more than that, then we're going to have to look at new pans for sure. So it seems like at this point most of what was sweet in the back pan has pushed through.
Right.
So basically what you can do is you can run water,
I just
pushes your sweet through a little bit, and running water doesn't affect anything at all. It just pushes it through. That way we've only got the syrup in the front pan.
now what's that?
We have had some interest from folks as far as being able to order from us and ship it. So we can do that. Ship it via United States Postal Service. They've got a flat rate box, so based off of how much you want, that's enough. Based off of how much you want, we can ship it.
Oh,
What?
oh,
Almost at 7? Getting close.
okay.
Raining.
And pouring.
No, that is possibly
No.
snoring.
Daddy, no. Bye.
Every year we're trying to upgrade some stuff with this system, whether it's on the evaporator or filtration, finishing, stuff like that. So this year we've earmarked a little bit of money into the new pan fund. Then we're going to be adding that 550-gallon tank, which is going to become our new nurse tank. See if you can see the puppy. Hey, get out of there. Anything sweet dogs like?
Oh, I'm like warm. And I'm like cold.
Yep. Yeah.
It's more cold than warm.
It just started raining outside, so
Man.
had to cover up the wood quick. Well, that was probably about the last feed we did for the front. That'll be about it for that for the day. Burning down nicely. So what that do is cool down.
Anything sweet children also like. And I'm like, wait, don't walk.
We are just letting that cool down at this point. Floats are all still on, but what I did is I shut off the valve from the back pan to the front pan just now. I guess now that we're done with that, I can give you a quick tour around. Noisy children. Oh, there's the fire extinguisher. Always got to keep that around. Pulling tractor, which we'll be using again soon. So this is the float box that runs from the back pan to the front pan. This is what I just shut down because I want this front pan to steam down a bit more. That way it's syrup. Here's what I was saying about our sight glass before. This is the level that is inside the evaporator right now. These are considered the safe zones. Actually, when I updated this, because we replaced this year, it's a boiler sight valve now, but I marked it a little bit off. So this is actually the correct mark here and right about there. Those are our two safeties. So it's just a touch low, but it just started flowing in again a little bit. So this is the back float pan where the hot sap comes in. You can see the amount of sugar sand that has accumulated just today back here. It looks like dirt, but it's kind of funny. It's really not. When your sap comes out of the tree, it is perfectly clear, and you boil it down and this stuff accumulates. You can see now that we've got water running in. There we go. And that brown on that circular thing is all sugar from running it. See if we can see in the back pan a little bit. Back pan is boiling pretty good. That's mostly water at this point. Not too much in there. And now that the valve is kicked on, you can see it's starting to come back up. So one big addition that we did this year, actually really not a big addition, but just one change we did is we put this little filter in line, and you can see it catches this little stuff, little pieces of bark, stuff like that. So that's been very nice. That's all less stuff that ends up in the evaporator itself. This is the back part of the room looking out. So that filter's up here. Your cold sap comes in here at about 40 degrees. It zigzags through, long ways through that hood, and it comes out this bottom pipe at 180 to 190. Comes up through that float box right there. Looks like my parents just showed up. This is the other side where we draw off from. This is a very special thermometer. It reads 7 degrees. At 7 degrees, it's syrup. So it's just about there. And if we look in here, there's a lot of sugar buildup at this point. And you can see that how dark it is around the edges. This is a cooking syrup at this point. But you see how big those bubbles get before they pop? That basically means this front pan is just about syrup, just shy of syrup. Look in from this side here. A little more light on this side, so it's a little easier to see in. That's a nice boil all the way through. That's what we like to see. We have, this is just a steam line to help divert it up through the hoopla. And this one just shoots straight up, as does the front. So that's the tour around the sugar house. And then out here we've got our IBC totes, 2 empties and 2.5 full. But we will go through at least 2 of them in a day of boiling, if not 3. A little bit of wood inside here. This stuff got a little bit wet in the rain one day, so we stacked it in here just to help dry it out. I figured I would end up using it this year. We did not, but that's the grand tour. Oh, and each one of these lines that comes off is condensation. So there's a little condensation ring inside that hood, and that's what this line is, just dripping into that old galvanized bucket. And then that one back there, dripping down into that bucket, is condensation off the back hood. And you heard me say the front of the back, if that makes sense. But right here, the very front of the back, that's condensation dripping out of that. And that is our test cup along with hydrometer. That's how I keep it cold, or keep it warm. Yeah, excuse me, keep it warm, because that gets quite warm. But so that's the tour around the sugar house. I guess that's going to be it for us today, or for the year even, as far as boiling. Hopefully I'll get some free time and do some other videos here soon. But thank you everyone for watching. Very much appreciate it. If you haven't done so, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. It does make a difference for us. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a good day.